welcome to our Waymo ride in an autonomous vehicle here, Anubhav. Before we get started for the audience, if you could make an introduction first about yourself and then about Ericsson Enterprise Wireless.
Absolutely. Thank you, Roy. Thank you, Jim, for this opportunity. I'm Anubhav Arora. I lead the security and AI engineering teams at Ericsson Enterprise Wireless. At Ericsson Enterprise, we make solutions for enterprises that use wireless WAN, formerly coming from the Cradlepoint business acquisition that Ericsson made, as well as private 5G solutions and all the security services that come together to connect, not only connect, but also securely connect the enterprises to their remote locations. Wireless WAN, as we all know, has multiple use cases like this one right here, autonomous vehicles, transportation, IoT devices, public safety, branches, and the private 5G has multiple use cases in energy and OT, in large factories, in large airports, and places like that where coverage and SLAs of uptime and other security parts that 3GPP standards that private 5G uses are more important to and give the precedence towards use of that technology versus others. So as we are here in RSA, we know security is really important.
That's right.
And part of wireless WAN and even private 5G is actually security services that we provide. Using that would be the NetCloud SASE that we that my team is responsible for engineering side of things, as well as AI services that we use for AI ops.
Excellent. Yeah, certainly. 5G has been rolling out over the last couple of years, and as you point out, not just in the macro environment, but also in private wireless situations as well, especially for manufacturing, oil and gas, mines, and the like. And I know certainly Ericsson has been the big player across all those things. I think the enterprise unit that you're in, it's interesting because you're going after a lot of enterprise use cases. And the Cradlepoint asset is one that's really valuable, big brand name in critical infrastructure, critical services. I think yes, autonomous vehicles, certainly 5G is really important, but also, as you pointed out before, branch services with fixed wireless access increasingly.
Yes.
So maybe if you could explain why it is that with sort of SASE and certainly there are different SASE offerings out there. What's unique about the Ericsson Enterprise Wireless SASE, and why what role does this 5G or intelligence play in your SASE versus, say, other solutions from networking or security vendors?
Yeah, absolutely. So our business is cellular, and connecting enterprises to their remote locations, to the remote employees, to remote devices using cellular. And cellular has its own defining characteristics. It comes with unpredictable bandwidth, sometimes with metering, sometimes with locations that can move around. It has its own sense of identity, like SIM cards and device identity, not user identity. So what we try to do in the SASE that we provide, which we actually use as 5G SASE, is to incorporate these elements and to make sure that cellular is bread and butter for us in terms of the primary connectivity of these routers that are connecting to the cloud, and making sure that because we have sometimes unreliable bandwidth, sometimes we have mission critical needs from application side. We provide solutions that allow you to get better SLAs for your mission critical applications, better uptimes, better understanding of how applications are understood and mapped to these kind of algorithms that make sure that with one link down or with one link degraded, you can still get your application correctly done. And on top of that, because a lot of devices connect on our networks and not users, it's actually more device centric. IoT devices, autonomous vehicle is almost all, the whole thing is a device by itself. And how do you make sure that device identity is part of your policy engines? Device identity can be leveraged to actually give you the right policy controls and security controls. So our SASE follows full zero trust principles, darknet, microsegmentation, least privileged access, one policy engine, continuous monitoring, full visibility, but is optimized for 5G in these senses.
Got it. That makes sense. Now you brought up, zero trust. Certainly that's
Yeah.
important, and I know that you've been expanding the offering around zero trust and some of the security capabilities
Yeah.
of the system,
Yeah.
especially that makes sense in the OT environment too,
Yes.
right? It's where
Yes.
I think the brand is definitely strong. Um, Maybe you want to talk about some of the new capabilities
Sure.
and why are customers demanding those features,
Yes.
from you?
Yes. So one of the new capabilities we just announced is what we call Clientless ZTNA.
Mm-hmm.
So ZTNA, as you all know, is the capability that maps an identity to an application. But
Right.
in general, it is for your users, your corporate users.
Yeah, zero
And
trust network access
right,
into a resource that you're trying to
into a
get to
resource that you want to
securely.
get internal
It's a
resource.
better version of a VPN, if
Yes.
you will. Right.
Yes.
Yes.
But when you have devices on your network, and on top of that, a lot of the device monitoring might be subcontracted out to another group or
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
partner of yours that may not be your corporate users. How do you then give them safe access to your devices and
Right.
to your to your resources, your assets? So that is where our clientless ZTNA solution comes in. It allows you to take an untrusted device, untrusted user potentially, and give them access to your trusted resources through a pane of isolation, which is essentially remote browser isolation technology. And that remote browser isolation technology has controls that prevent any kind of actions that you do not want to happen from
Right.
the user and device side to your resource.
Yeah.
So that was a new capability we just announced, Clientless ZTNA, which uses an isolation plane. And not only it gives you access to web services, but services like RDP and SSH also.
Got it. No, I think that's really, really critical. And I think, the clientless, as you point out, for third-party access to resources, someone trying to get into the smart HVAC system, or maybe a service technician that's trying to get to the interface, for, I don't know, pick your favorite, healthcare MRI machine, or smart machines, or the factory, right? So controls. I think that makes a lot of sense. And with clientless, you don't have to create complicated things like, let me provision your VPN for you. Can you please install this third-party VPN client? It's mine and not yours, right? And that's a lot of extra overhead. Yeah.
Usually a client makes a lot of sense when it's a managed device.
Yeah.
And you can push the client through your management platform.
Yes.
And you are not only relying on the client, but also relying on the managed device aspects of it, other device posture aspects that we can actually check for. And that establishes the trust on the end user device.
Yeah.
But when you do not have trust on the end user device, you do not have any management on it. The client is part of the story, and that's why you need, and that's not enough to establish that trust, and hence you need a solution like clientless.
Yeah, no, I think it makes sense. It's very synergistic with the rest of the offerings. In terms of private 5G use cases, or even public 5G use cases, or remote connectivity. It doesn't always have to be 5G. It could be a LAN connection or whatever, right? Exactly. It doesn't matter. I mean, it supports that as well.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Very interesting. Where do you see the product line go from here, right? As we sort of look ahead, where do you see the Ericsson Enterprise Wireless, in terms of proceeding and maturing both across the wireless aspect and the security aspect, right? How do you see that progressing?
So as we progress together with the portfolio that we were just looking at, wireless WAN portfolio and the private 5G portfolio, the private 5G is actually getting into a lot more new verticals. And OT is a very brand new vertical. OT tends to have its own requirements in some ways. OT devices are special. They have their own needs. They have their own network level needs, as well as application level needs, as well as monitoring needs, and also protocols. And when we look at the wireless WAN side of things, we have a lot of business on the IoT side, a lot of business on the mobile side, and branch side. And branch mobility and IoT also are actually unique in some respects with their requirements. IoT has its own requirements, and branches where you have users, you have multiple segments, like a guest VLAN comes in. Even a car like this might have a guest Wi-Fi, and it might have telemetry systems that are mission critical, and it might have cameras or other things that might be not that mission critical but just need uploads, right? So what we see here is a proliferation of different type of use cases, but not just a proliferation, actually a coming together also, in the sense that what we might call mobility, where mobility was just provide wireless access to your users on a bus, when you look at an autonomous taxi like this, you actually might be looking at almost branch-ish requirements.
Yeah, that's fair.
And you might be looking at almost like public safety-ish requirements, because the emergency services in this vehicle, the some of the services that might be required to connect to their servers at all times are mission critical, while some are not, and some are completely optional, like guest Wi-Fi. And those are the kind of requirements we see in branch. So what we see is a little bit of adaptation of these type of things and growth of these type of the verticals in different ways, but some connections between them also. And in the private 5G side, a lot more emphasis on the operational side or OT side. And as there is a lot more adoption of private 5G on the OT side of things. So as you look at all of this, the requirements that we see in our business are expanding, yet coming together in some ways. And some of those requirements, for example, having a proper darknet, having a proper microsegmentation strategy from all the way from LAN to WAN. And in that story, you need microsegmentation at your LAN level. You also need at RAN level, which is slices, which is another thing we do. And then all the way down to your resource level, and then providing safe access from portals, from behind the site or from a strict client, and all of that in a seamless single policy way. So we have all of these elements, and we are continuing to work on all of these elements, but making this seamless in a way that the adoption in private 5G and OT, and making an adoption on a vehicle like this or a branch like this with similar requirements of segmentation or similar slicing requirements as they come around over time, is what we are working on right now. And those are the more futuristic sort of elements that we are looking at and looking to do how you can not only do this at the level of hundreds or thousands, but at even wider scale, which will actually hit us over time.
Yeah, makes sense when we get those massive, IoT devices on the network.
I am actually intrigued that this car is almost humanistic
It is.
in this
It's
driving
very human.
behavior.
It's very human.
Because it's not afraid to defy some rules. And that's the fun part to see this, because all of the conversations about AI security, those guys are neglecting that they've already...
No, I mean, the Waymo is very human.
The Waymo is very
if you see
human.
intersection and it thinks it can make it, it will aggressively try to make it like a human would. As opposed to,
So that's an interesting thought, because when we see 2030, for example, like where we look out to be, where is technology taking us, right? And all the AI, at RSA here, pretty much every booth, pretty much every talk is about AI. And the fun part about AI is that we really don't know what AI is going to enable at scale for us, because we, in some ways, are in denial that it is really taking over our own functions, like driving.
Driving a vehicle.
Right here, right? We are all sitting in the backseat and the car is driving.
Exactly.
And over time, from my perspective, autonomous will really be the right word to describe the technology. And when we come back to like wireless WAN and security business, for example, what does autonomous mean, right? How do you think about an autonomous connectivity, autonomous security? Will actually be, at some point, a huge shift from today, because today's systems are not near autonomous, and every significant function or even minor function is where there's a human in the loop. And even our own lives, we are starting to see ChatGPT and other things starting to take over many of those functions in a very formative way. And people who have started, my wife has started to use that. I'm not that much of an adoption, but I was talking to a colleague yesterday, and he's like, I've been starting to use it for 2 months, and it has changed my life completely. Completely. And when we see that kind of adoption in personal lives, I think that's where we need to measure ourselves to see where 2030 will take us, because our own selves will change, our own understanding of what autonomous means will change. But then the bigger question is, what are the controls on this technology? Is the controls itself autonomous at some point? Is the governance itself autonomous at some point? Is the governance also relegated to another AI version that is autonomously controlling the other AIs? So at that point, things become very difficult to understand. And when we look at security operations or network operations, it's easier to see, well, okay, we have networks that need to perform at the right bandwidth. We can put some autonomy on it. Security, we got to look at alerts. We got to tighten up the rules. That's probably the 2030 future. That's probably the future where a specific function can be autonomous, but then the human is writing the governance. Human is writing the control systems. Further than that, you can actually imagine even that getting autonomous.
Yeah.
And that's a difficult future to imagine, because at that point, the contributions of various human in the loop, non-human in the loop,
Yes.
identities, and today in one of the talks in RSA, I heard that for every human identity, there used to be, they said 35 non-human identities 1 or 2 years back. Now it's 90.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just the ratios are already mind-boggling
Yeah.
at today's scale.
Yep.
And at 2030 scale, if you have one human and you have 1,000 non-human identities correspondingly to worry about at that point, humans can't worry about it anymore.
That's right.
So
That's right.
autonomous systems are actually hard to imagine, not only because they're functionally autonomous, but because they're cross-functionally autonomous.
Yeah.
And every function has to have its own autonomy, working together autonomously.
Yeah.
And that future is not really a 2030 future from my thought, but who knows? I mean, the technology is accelerating really, really fast.
It is. It's going very, very fast. And my expectation is that, with the Ericsson solutions, I know seeing across of Ericsson, there's a lot of AI around that.
Yes.
The AI ops capabilities is in there. So my expectation is I'll see the enterprise wireless solutions have AI ops, more AI, AI in the security.
Absolutely.
I think that will evolve over the next couple of years.
And we're working on that. We have our own roadmap to fulfill some of these things, how we can progress today from where we are to say what we might say as intent as a service. So a human states the intent, and the system performs a closed loop function of the intent, all the way from deployment to operations to value confirmation to refinement. Right. And that would be like a 2030 vision for us in terms of operational technology that we can take out to our customers, not only from network operations, but also from security operations perspective, to go from what might be today a function that is rudimentary to say the least. And the way I would even compare some of these things, and we were talking about it some time back, was that today's technology, while we are all talking about ChatGPT and how it's foundationally changed our lives, we still struggle with autocorrect.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
And in a 2030 future, you're not struggling with autocorrect in some senses.
Yeah, that's
all of your systems, all of your functions that you interact with technology with will have a much better version than what might be simply stated as autocorrect or spell checks today that we are still all struggling with. And all of these systems will get into a state where it will enable real productivity use, because today some systems do that, some don't.
Right.
And our goal on Cradlepoint, our Ericsson Enterprise side, is to get AI ops functional to a level of state the intent, and we have a closed loop system performing the full validation of your intent and refinement as a consequence. That's our goal for that 20, maybe better than 2030. I would hope so. But we are working towards it, and then today's technologies has definitely enabled many angles of it. But it's a matter of putting it together, making it work, making sure that it has the right guardrails, it has the right functional specifications, that it doesn't stray away from the wrong things. Cellular specifically is a little bit of a challenge by itself, because cellular is hard to monitor. Monitoring itself can, it's like the Heisenberg situation. You measure it and you disturb it. And it doesn't really happen that much in other connectivity, but in cellular, your measurements can cause disturbance. But we do what we do in most cases. We're trying to do inline measurements, which are measurements based on traffic itself. And if needed, we will poke it and understand it from different perspectives. So with all of the measurements, how do you then get to better rule sets, better adaptations, better confirmation of the value, and then do it in a way that you can actually connect it with LLM-based services, which are now translating intent back down into operations.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to seeing that autonomous AI-enabled operations. It'll evolve over the next few years. So looking forward to trying it out. Or not trying it out, as it were. Very good. Thanks.
We'll have a demo next time.
Looking forward to seeing all those features and capabilities come out in the Ericsson Enterprise Wireless solutions. Very good. Well, thank you, Anubhav. Really appreciate your time here. Looking forward to the next time we chat.
Absolutely. Thank you, Roy. Thank you, Jim. This was awesome. And this was my first time in a Waymo. So I'm actually already intrigued by the technology that I'm being driven around in. So thank you for this experience, and thank you for the chat.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.